Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Self-Driven webinar featuring our guest, Joe Augustin, who is going to be taking us through the wonderful art and science of impactful virtual presentations this afternoon. I've had the pleasure of being acquainted with Joe as a result of attending something as esoteric as a mindfulness writing retreat. And therefore I had the great, I didn't know he was such a big deal in Singapore at that stage. I have since found out he's a little bit of a big deal. Wouldn't you say, Joe? You're a little bit of a big deal in Singapore. And so for those who are somewhere been under a rock, Joe was a former radio DJ, larger than life personality. He likes to say that any woman, what is that line you say, Joe? Any woman.
I think any woman of a certain age has woken up with me at some point.
And it's
because I do radio, morning radio. Yeah.
So absolutely. So he started, his entertainment sort of is his larger than life personality on radio. And of course, we know there's lots of skills required in staying engaging on that medium. And thereafter became a professional MC as well as professional presentation coach to executives. He's appeared on some TV shows, and most recently, well before the pandemic, sort of pivoted to online presentations via Facebook Live, and most recently being commissioned by the National University of Singapore as they issue webinars, educational webinars, giving people updates on the pandemic. So today what we're going to be doing is, in a very easy breezy fashion, try to glean as much as possible from Joe about the art and science as he has developed it of impactful virtual presentations, beginning with simple things like, for the average Joe, no pun intended, what is an ideal sort of semi-professional home setup in terms of tech that you might wish to consider investing in now that online presentations are very much the norm? We're going to be spending a little bit of time on framing the message that you want to be screaming. You know, before you get up on a roof and shout out to the high heavens, figuring out what is the message that you want to say that will carry the most impact. And then certainly spending the better part of the hour that we have leveraging on Joe's considerable experience impacting people through his communications, whether on radio, on stage, and certainly in his new role virtually on screen, online. So Joe, take us through your thought process. What is the art and science of impactful virtual? Where does it start for you?
Well, Michelle, first of all, thank you so much for the invitation to be on this. And I want to thank everybody for signing up and being on time. Those of you who came late, by the way, sorry you missed the lucky draw for the free condo. Well, I for 30 years, basically, I've been working on radio. And a lot of people kind of think there's a kind of a disjoint between radio and maybe the virtual world and communicating like this. But the essence of all communication is it happens one-on-one. The idea that even if I do this, even if this goes out to thousands and thousands of people at a time, the communication that you're experiencing is going to be one-to-one. You're looking into the screen right now. You're seeing my face, and it's my connection with you. It's going to happen one-to-one. So for the good part of those 30 years, I've focused very much on reaching out across the airwaves, you know, to communicate directly into the minds of someone who's on the other side of things. So that's the first thing about communication. It is really about one-to-one communication. So you touch on a few things that I'm doing right now. It just happens to be that as I was unceremoniously removed from my radio job. Actually, unceremoniously for me, which is not renewed. Partly, I'd say, because of what I like to do and what's worthwhile for management to deal with, right? So for me, I like to push boundaries. I like to always, cause emotional responses in an audience. And for people who are in the more administrative, they don't like to handle as many complaints and stuff like that, and they don't get any rewards for having those kinds of buttons pushed. I'm someone who is not, I guess, on their side, right? So I'm here to try to get people interested in what they're doing. So I wanted to start off maybe with a little bit of a poll. We're in a meeting format today. So just very quickly in the chat, I'd like to find out from you, what is it that you do? I'm trying to find out who our audience is today. So in one or two words, what is it that you do? Could you just tell me in the chat? I'd love to see what it is.
Wonderful.
And I hope it's going to be an interactive audience as well. You know, I hope everyone's just not put in their stuff and then turned it on and then they sat back and doing something else right now, even though there's some really nice things on Netflix.
And I think that's a really valid concern that we have to deal with in virtual presentations. The fact that it's not our listeners' jobs to necessarily listen to us, right, Joe?
No, it's definitely not. It's no one's job to do that. Okay, I'm going to do something right now, which is about this meeting. So right now, the spotlight is actually sort of, I think, permanently on you. So what would have happened for the last few minutes is people would have seen your face while I was talking, which arguably might have been the best combination. So this is me. This is what I look like right now, and this is what I do. And what you're looking at is basically what people see when they interact with me online. This is my virtual presence. And that's really what it is. It's the idea of virtual really is about, you know, getting a connection across a divide, and the divide right now is space. You know, because of the pandemic, a lot more of the meetings or interactions have all gone online. And I don't know about you, but I actually kind of prefer this because I can rush around from one place to another, so to speak, without any traffic. There's no parking. I mean, the food isn't as good, but you know, that's you got to give something to get something. So I'm looking at the list. Quite a few people are in HR, and so you're in the field of I guess developing people, looking after people, career advisor. I got a graphic designer as well. It's always pleasure for me when I see someone who's in that field, a visual field, because the amount of time I spend looking for the right shirt to wear, you know, especially when you're doing it in front of your wife and you go like, I'm going to wear this. And she says, I don't think so. And you go like, okay, I'll change my mind. So yeah, a lot of people from HR, but people involved in the secretarial line. We have someone, it looks like from radio. I feel even more pressure right now.
Oh, you can handle that, Joe, I'm sure.
Okay. So yes, on to the virtual presentation, what's important about the virtual presentation, and some things you can do. So first of all, you mentioned about this whole setup, right? And you mentioned to me about the average Joe, the kind of setup you can do. And if you have a certain amount of money, let's say you put aside for this, I'm going to assume that you are going to put some money aside for it, because this is the new reality. This is actually... some people have said it's been disrupted and we can't wait to go back to where things were. You're actually now in the future, right?
Absolutely.
Because if you think about what's going to happen down the line, if you talk about 5G, broader band, right? This is actually going to be more what is the reality, because there's actually going to be less and less reason that you actually had to come face to face with someone and have a conversation. So in the present of this change towards 5G and broader band, then what I think is you need to do better in the area of production. So what's production? I hope that production is obvious as soon as you look at my picture and you go like, okay, that's quality, right? And one of the things that I try to tell my clients about is what you want to do is you want to win even before you start talking. You want people
Tell us about
to
that. Win before you start talking. Interesting.
Well, we are primarily, I mean, we're all animals, right? I mean, that's the fundamental. We're animals and we're driven by certain cues. And so what I'm trying to do is help people kind of like press those buttons as well. So winning before you even start talking is this: when you look at the screen and someone's, you know, been highlighted, or you look around the screen of all the different people who are at a meeting, everybody's making a bit of an impression on you. There's the words, there's their names, their titles, and there's also the visual that comes across. And if I can go one step further with me, is that after the visual, despite the disappointment of how I actually look, everything else I think looks in place and in order. So there's a lot of professional lighting that's going into this, techniques that I use in professional lighting. And then the next step for me, of course, is the sound as well. So I have sound which is exceptional, even for some radio or TV stations, because I've decked out my place to be about sound as well. Now, the thing
So
about
obviously you have that pedigree, but for again, as I said, the average Joe who doesn't come from an Uber sound technician sort of background, etc., what would be a minimum would you recommend for lighting, for sound, for a camera, a video camera, webcam?
Okay, so I was going to say if you want to invest in something, one of the main things you should really invest in is actually lights. And a lot of people are going to run towards the ring light, because you've seen a lot of videos that are done on them. Not all ring lights are the same. Not all ring lights are as good as the other. You need to get a ring light that has what you call continuous light that doesn't flicker. And what that basically means is, because a lot of lights actually have a kind of a flickering that you can't see with your eye, but when you marry that with a camera, you're going to see that flickering, and it's going to come across as well. So you've got to invest in some reasonable light. And I put it this way: if you have a choice between getting a good camera and a good light, start with the light first, because a lot of cameras these days do pretty well if you give it enough light.
Okay. So that's something you can literally go to the light shop and say, boss, give me a non-flickering light, or is there some more technical term that, and this is for the noobs in the audience, including myself, I have no clue.
Well, the best light is up in the sky, and if you can figure out how to use the sunlight to light yourself up, that's always going to be the best. So, and try not to do direct sunlight. That's pretty harsh. But like if you're in a house like yourself right now, Michelle, you've got the window next to you. You probably got some drapes that sort of like diffuse the light a little bit as well. But that is a very powerful source of light. But the reason why I advocate getting artificial lights is because we can't always have our meetings only in the daytime, especially if we're doing any international work. So my setup is designed to look this way any time of the day, all times of the day. So it's an internal thing. And one more thing that I do is, of course, I use a green screen. So what you see behind me is not really what my life is about. But even the choice of it says something about what I am. The implementation of virtual backgrounds. I mean, you should be trying to do it so that if people are asking, is that real? Is that really where you are? Whatever, then you're on the right track. If people have no doubt that it's an artificial background, then you haven't actually. I think you haven't won.
Right.
You haven't hit the mark.
That's amazing, because I actually thought this was your home studio, as of course, as opposed to some of those Bali-esque backgrounds that we see, which we want to be there, but we're clearly not there.
Yeah.
You're saying I mean, moving forward, sort of those cliched standard backdrops, virtual backdrops is probably not the way to go.
Well, you want to choose something that is appropriate, something that works for you. So you want it to be good for you. So Gary's asked about the lighting in terms of 60 hertz frequency light. Okay, so this is about electricity and how it works. So in Malaysia, Singapore, our electricity actually oscillates at about 50 hertz. But your cameras have all kinds of different kinds of frequencies as well. So what you actually want is a light that doesn't have a high frequency. You want the light to actually be a light that it's quite complicated to think about, but essentially if you think about lights, the way most LEDs will work nowadays, the light comes on and then it sort of fades off, but in very, very quick moments. So you want something that actually has a slow trail, so it comes on but doesn't just drop off straight away like that, because if it does that too fast, then what happens is that becomes flicker. So the irony is, in terms of light, in terms of quality that you can use, the old-fashioned lights, tungsten lights, are really the best because they don't flicker at all. They're just burning bright and hot. But if you're looking for something, what you can do is you can use your phone sometimes and change if it has a shutter speed that you can change. When you're looking for those lights, you can actually go there and just kind of have a look at what the lights look like under through your camera. And you can see fluttering, or you can see sort of a jittering happening along the way. So that's just light. Sound is about having the microphone as close to you as possible. That's actually the most basic thing. And the tricks sometimes are because we watch TV, or we watch a radio, something that looks like it's coming from radio. We usually imagine something like this. So like they have this microphone right in front of me like this, and I talk and I sound like this. Instantly you go like, oh, it's because the microphone is there, but it's not, right? So it's about having a microphone that's close to you. Now if you look at this picture, you're going like, where is this microphone, right? Where could it be? Well, it could be a number of places. It could be a lavalier microphone, a lapel microphone that is hidden under my shirt. I could have it taped to my body so that when I remove it later, I'll scream. It could also be somewhere else. So what is closest to me right now, which you can't see? So would anybody like to just guess in the chat where this microphone that you're hearing me through
Let's keep it clean, guys.
Let me assure you, if I could throw my voice as far as where it wasn't clean, it'd be a whole different game. Already 2 people have given the right answer. It's above my head, so I can just, it's right above here. I won't bring it into shot, but I'm just going to tap my fingers. So I think you can just hear, can you hear that?
So you've literally, I mean, if you do show us will it spoil the setup, but you've literally hung a microphone up above your head.
Yeah. So this is actually pretty hardcore because most people don't have this. So this is not the average Joe solution, but the average Joe solution, which is not too bad actually, is a lavalier microphone, and that is basically a microphone that you can have just stuck to your lapel. Just have it up here like this, and because it's here, if you think about where it is this close. If anybody was going to be that close to you, if someone was lying on your, on your shoulder blade, they'd hear you pretty clearly. Right, so you want to try to have the sound be picked up from as close as possible. There is too close. When you go, like sometimes you see someone put the microphone right there, and it sounds like just whoa 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 whoa, right? Whatever it is, that's too close. But this is actually very good. So a lavalier microphone, that's actually one of the best things. It doesn't cost you that much.
Okay.
But what I'd suggest is you get one that actually has all the amplification stuff built into it, so that it's a USB plug rather than a plug that you have to put in through another amplifier. That's a whole different step.
What about those headphones with mic? Some folks are asking Grace and Norfaiza.
Yeah. Well, great question, and this is the thing about winning before you start, right? So the thing is, when you come on screen and you start talking, the question I just had a client who was arguing with me about this as well, because he felt comfortable using his headset, and I wanted to use his headset, saying that it would sound better, all the different reasons he had. And the counter argument that I had basically was this: what do you want to have in people's minds? Do you want people to kind of assign to you all these qualities of gravitas, of leadership, of whatever it is? Do you want them to assign all those things to you at the start of it? Or do you want them to take away from you, right? So I think that headsets and gamers headsets, especially if you're a slightly younger person, it does suddenly make you into a gamer. So you're not that person that I want to sit down and talk to about business. I mean, if you're talking to me about gaming and the latest stuff and all that, I think it's completely fine. But if it doesn't help you in that visual, because remember, we're all just processing, we're trying to identify quickly what this person means, what you stand for. If I look at the headset, what does it tell me? What does it say?
Right.
What are the intangible signals you're sending out to somebody?
Absolutely. So whether you want to be identified as a gamer or a telemarketer, or whatever the case may be, right?
Yep.
And it's really within your hands. What, to your point, if the impression you want is of gravitas, of an influence and power, that may not be the look that you necessarily want to portray, even though it's very convenient.
That's right. Absolutely.
Okay, great. So we've covered so far lighting, sound, visuals next.
Well, let's talk about visuals and talk about what this medium is about, because we know when we do meetings and virtual online stuff, especially if you're doing larger ones, we tend to forget there is that this is actually a TV show. Ultimately, it's a TV show, right? And so we tend to run things in a very similar way. So this is I'm gonna do some things here which might seem like pot shots at this particular meeting, at how it was run from the start and all that?
Oh,
And I want to
please.
tell you.
We're complete noobs at this. This is why we hired you as our first, guest, Joe, because we need to be taught how to do things the right way.
Okay, so I want to tell you that when I talk to everybody, almost everyone does this, but most people don't do. Okay, everyone does this, right? So when you come in, you're waiting for this, and then I have to hang around and go. Okay, well, let's see what happens next. So what I try to do is I say, look, you want to create a customer experience for someone when they come in for a meeting. So one of my clients, NUS, when people arrive early or on time for the webinar, what they experience is this.
Which is as it should be, yes. Pray tell us how we can affect this.
Okay, so that's just a little thing to give people some anticipation. And then what I do beyond that is before the actual start of the event, you want to create more anticipation for the webinar as well. So that goes from that into this.
Great stuff. And so you're literally first playing a slide with music, and then you play video.
Yeah, so I'm gonna to cut short because it's a kind of it's a minute run up with different dates about the COVID-19 development, and that video is updated every time the webinar is coming up, so that there's the latest news that leads up to that very moment. So it becomes it just highlights the moment, and all you're doing in all kinds of presentation actually is you're going to make that step. You're trying to raise the next step for the audience. You want to have someone anticipate the next thing. Okay, so someone's just asked about, is that video and audio from PowerPoint, or am I doing a screen share? So this is something that I'm doing, which I'm going to share with you about how Zoom works, because most people are going to be working on Zoom, but we also work on other platforms. Most times when you try to do a screen share, you're not going to get really great frame rate. Okay, so if I were to do a full-on screen share with you right now on Zoom, you would get a 1080p picture, which is high definition, but the frame rate would drop to about 5 frames per second. So if you're trying to show me a trailer or some kind of video about your latest thing, it's gonna maybe sound okay, but you're gonna have only like 5 frames per second, which is basically, it's like flipbook sort of animation style, right? So unless your corporate video is done flipbook style, it's probably not going to survive the translation. So what I've done with this one is I'm actually doing something with a vision mixer that outputs what you call a virtual camera output. So you're seeing me through a software where I am putting out a number of things, including sound cues, including some other things that I hope to share with you today.
So is that something that the average Joe can subscribe to without heavy investment, or is this only for the production gods?
Well, this is the thought that I'd like to have you think about, right? If you are waiting for the world to return to normal, and you define it as being what was yesterday, and you want to budget yourself for all the yesterday stuff, right? That means, of course, having a lot of clothes, many shoes, some of us more than others, Michelle. There's a lot of stuff that we spent money on that I'm going to suggest that if you were to move that money into the virtual space, you would get a lot more bang for buck. I mean, for one thing, think about this, right? Think about the number of dollars you've saved already this year not having to buy pants. I know the question now is begged, right? Am I wearing pants?
That's not a visual that I reckoned on in this session, but yes, let's take this to the logical extreme, Joe, please.
I'm saying that from a budgetary standpoint, there are lots of things that you're not going to be spending money on if you embrace the future, and then you say, okay, now I'm going to start moving that money towards the things that I want to do. So if you talk about the software that I use, I'm going to spend in licensing, I'm going to spend much less than I would have on a suit, right? That's the thing. In fact, if you talk about the money that I spend on a suit, You can get the lights, you can get the camera, you can get the sound, and you can get the software, right?
Absolutely. And I think that's
Now,
going to be a brilliant idea. And I know that we want to make sure that we cover in the remaining half hour that we have a lot more of the tips. So I think for expediency's sake, we might list down the actual, software and equipment that you're using, for accompanying the replay or the description of this video, and we can send that out to the folks. But
okay.
I absolutely get what you're saying, Joe, that in the new normal, investment in software, in platforms, in tools that will help us navigate the world of the future is crucial. Unless you're thinking somehow the world is going to flip. So we know that there needs to be some level of investment in the future. And next, what would you recommend?
Well, the next idea is to think about the skills that you have to have with you. So, like we talk about, so the mindset is these skills are for the production wizard and all that, right? I'm a radio guy. So I'm going to let that sink in for just a moment, right? I'm a radio guy and I'm doing the stuff I'm doing right now. It's because it is just what it is. The world is what it is. And you can say that, well, you know what, I don't like the world as it is. And you can have an argument about that, but the world's going to argue back and win. The thing about skills, the thing about technology and what's going to be required is this. There's a child right now who's finishing in primary school or just playing around on the internet, whatever it is. They have what they call basic skills in Photoshop or in filmmaking. And if we are going to say that, oh, these are skills for younger people to have, and therefore, let them do that, then we are priming ourselves to be eaten alive, when they come of age and come for what we do, because they're going to be able to do things in a more efficient way. They're going to be able to communicate in a medium which more people understand. Because if you think about this, right? I mean, the writing of articles and emails and stuff like that, that's great stuff. But if you can do it really effectively in terms of video, then you are going to get across to that audience much faster, right? And that's and in terms of velocity, in terms of getting action and getting results. Video really is the way to go. And if you look at all the platforms and how how all of them are engaging, how all of them are developing, even LinkedIn, the slowest of all of them in terms of snazziness, are embracing video and now vertical video. It obviously says, well, this is the thing. This is what's working, and this is what you have to get good at. So
my CEO would absolutely love what you're saying right now, because he's literally taught himself how to create videos, explainer videos, at least in the last 3 days or something like that. And he's essentially out millennialing the millennials, because he does overnight what probably would take someone with less hunger to embrace skill taking in the new norm. Because that's exactly what our brand is about. It's about upskilling. It's about embracing the future using technology, and engaging people. And I see a question here. Vanita, you're asking about software, and we'll definitely share that with you as to compatibility with Zoom. But Hassan is asking, how do you start creating connection, engagement with the participants? What is it that you do that hopefully will not have someone make a sandwich in the middle of your presentation?
first of all, I think I'm all about people having sandwiches while they're doing this, because if you are, what I'm really worried about is that you leave altogether and go somewhere else. When it comes to connection, one of the things that is missed often is the fact that the eye contact is very important. So I don't know if you've been watching with any kind of eagle-eyed observations about what I do, but I'm always looking down the camera, and that is a little bit of a weird thing to do, because there's no one there, literally, in terms of physicality. But I'm spending my time looking down the lens, and that's one tremendous part of the equation. The fact that when you talk to someone, you take the effort to do that. So I'm sure there are going to be a number of people on our call who've had the experience. My eyes are up here, right?
Do you feel more engaged now that I'm actually literally looking at the screen? Because I was looking to my left at where Joe is appearing on my screen, but because he's just said that, I'm going to focus now on addressing the camera. He's been looking at the camera the whole time, whereas obviously Noob Michelle has not. but I will be a convert. So yes, great. Thanks,
But
Hassan, for the validation.
yeah, the yeses are coming in, and one of the simple ways of doing that, and it's a crazy old little tip that I give my clients as well, is I go into a magazine, cut out a face that you kind of like, and then just paste it right next to your webcam, and
Oh,
that actually
great tip.
helps. Yeah, so it actually helps, because what happens is we're trying to I'm always trying to hack the human experience, right? So your brain is looking for a face. It's always looking for a human connection, and so when you look up and you go and you see that face, you're gonna kind of talk to it. You know, if you're slightly off to the left or right, it's fine, but that's a better connection. So that's one simple thing you can do, just to keep looking at the camera.
So tell us what else, Joe. Tell us. We're wrapped as an audience to hear more of your tips.
Okay, so one of the other things that you really need to do when you're online
Is that a trick?
it is. Uh, it's it's about actually spending the time ahead of. I'll stop that irritating thing. Negotiate bandwidth. You know, we don't just live in a home by ourselves. We've got people with us if we're working from home. And you have to make sure, first of all, that you have enough bandwidth. I don't know how many of you actually test your bandwidth from time to time, but you should. You should find out using speedtest.net or one of the other free ones as well, how broad your band is, right? And also in terms of who else is in the family, who else in the family might be using this the bandwidth. If you have a child or sometimes a husband who's playing computer games, that's going to affect things. And let's be fair, wives can do the same thing as well. If there's a brand new show that's just dropped and the torrents, never mind torrents, you just have a few Netflix accounts running, doing a 4K video or two, that can affect things as well. So you want to make sure that that is something that you negotiate.
Wonderful. So when you have a very important virtual presentation that you need to impress somebody, make sure nobody else, you pre-negotiated, no gaming, no Netflix, no streaming, at least until, my half hour, 45-minute, 1 hour slot is done.
Yeah.
Great.
And you might even consider doing what I do, which is basically I have a broadband fiber connection, because I do it professionally. I have redundant connections, and you might want to have a second provider of internet connectivity as well, and always have your phone ready to go as the final backup, just in case everything else goes to pot.
Is there a minimum that we should be looking for? Again, I'm asking on behalf of all the tech noobs that may not, wish to ask this and expose themselves to being the noobs that they are.
It's actually quite challenging to tell exactly what the minimum is, because Zoom tells you need 3 megabits per second. And I've had clients who start falling off at about when they got 15, 20. They're really living on the edge already. Being aware of your connection is important as well. So on your screen, you'll get some feedback about your internet connectivity, and sometimes it tells you it's going bad. And if it is going bad, what Zoom always does, it preserves audio first. So video begins to deteriorate first. And sometimes if you really, really have to, you just go like, okay, I'm just going to turn off my video for a while we continue in audio. Is
that a that's a last ditch attempt, right? To maintain the fidelity of the discussion, if you will.
Yeah, I think if you want to save the flow, don't make the software work too hard. If you haven't got enough bandwidth, sometimes it just happens that way. Sometimes you even if you got broadband, even if you got fiber, whatever it is, the internet just doesn't like you that day. You then have to try to do the best fallback, and the best fallback really is just to say, okay, I'm just going to turn off my video for a while so that we can stay connected. Do the old-fashioned thing and talk.
Right. And so to that point about talking, we've covered a fair bit about technology, but for us as presenters ourselves, what can we do to bring more of ourselves to the table to create more impact? I was reading, I think, one of the earlier articles about impactful virtual presentations, where they asked speakers to use words that ask the audience to do something, meaning to say, starting off your sentences with, imagine that you are XYZ. And so you're literally forcing people, well, inviting them, if you will, inviting them to engage themselves more deeply in the conversation versus assuming that because you are so tremendously good looking, Joe, someone's going to listen to you just by virtue of that alone.
Yes. Well, I've long given up on that last technique of just getting away with my good looks. So I'm going to show you. Actually, I'm gonna reach deep right now and share with you the secret weapon. This is the organ you need to use to connect and really have an impact on your audience.
Ooh.
So that's it. The human brain, and I happen to have one right here. So.
To spare.
Yeah, well, it's barely used, so I could take it out and take it for a ride. I won't spend that much time having fun with that. I do these moments because I know I'm going to be driving someone in the audience nuts. They're like, how the hell does he do that?
I know. And I hope this is going to be part of the listing of resources that you're going to share with us for those who are inclined to upskill themselves,
Yeah,
as you have clearly done, Joe. If you've been paying attention, my dear lovely audience, that we're actually taking questions on the fly on the chat. And so I think that way we'll be able to cover a lot more. This is a free flow conversation. One of
yeah.
the questions coming from Karen is, how important is the body posture, facial expression in
Yeah.
influencing participants to hear your message?
Very important. Basically, that the fundamental question you have to ask yourself is this, right? I'm a human being. How do I react to things? Now, one of the things that's going to happen, and frequently is a problem, is when you're on a virtual call, is you don't have feedback on yourself. You don't see what you're doing for yourself. And so you'll have, people just be part of a call, and the angle of the camera, for instance, is something that they don't work on. And here's a simple tip: don't have that camera angling up from a table that's low down in front of you. Now, Michelle is going to be a little bit uncomfortable about this, but at least your camera is quite high up,
Okay.
relatively speaking.
So no
But
nostril hair, I hope.
well, I would hope that yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. No nostril hair. But if you just talk about that angle, because what you're trying to do is simulate face to face as much as possible, right? So I think about it that way in terms of posture. It's also good for flattery in terms of how you look in a photograph. So the general tip is to have the camera, right in front of you, just slightly below your eye line. And the reason why you want to do that is there's a slight psychological advantage of being taller, right? So you want to be a little bit taller than someone,
Mm,
but you don't want to be overbearing, and you don't want to
right.
fill the entire screen with your face. The next thing, of course, is how we work as human beings. We're looking for facial expressions and other cues. Now, I could fill the whole screen with my face, and you could be sized up to here, and I could talk, and you could just rely on my facial expressions. But you lose some of the advantage that comes along with using your hands. Because certain things you can do with your hands that make a difference. So if you're talking about ideas that you want to talk about, some bad stuff, the arguments against and whatever and all that, well, on this hand, what we're doing is this. It's
Okay, so these are tools and you should be able to leverage on them
Yeah, it's
without
subtle. I mean,
being European overly.
well, the thing about this is that, again, a lot of the stuff that I talk about is actually about the fact that the human beings, the fact that makes us animals, and because what we're driven by is our limbic brain, the animal brain, that is driven by the need for survival, and what that means is that we're always on alert for movement, change, and anything that might be a threat. And that actually is the mechanism that drives this. But that mechanism is what you can use to get attention. So movement, any kind of movement, that kind of thing. This is what helps people get attention. And whether or not it is completely relevant, there's always what happens is actually you learn to filter off irrelevance. That's the way we work now.
Mm.
We detect, and then we go like, okay, but I can ignore that. So if you move a lot, it doesn't matter whether you move a lot or not. But if you move a lot and constantly talk about stuff that doesn't make any sense at all and doesn't make a difference, then people realize that, okay, I can ignore this person while they're talking because they're not going to say anything of great importance. So that's the mechanism. But movement, absolutely, and little things like that. I mean, look, it literally grabs your attention. What's happening, right?
What's happened? Absolutely. Great. So we've covered, let me just see, we've covered some tech, audio, visual, costumes, wearing of pants or not. um, some voice. Are there voice techniques that you care to share? Does that make a difference if we don't all have radio voices?
What I like to get people to do, first of all, is get comfortable with the fact that their voice is pretty okay. Most people have a good voice, right? And if you understand that the voice you have is the voice you communicate with, and if you can come across as sincerely as possible with that voice, people are much more attracted to it if that's your real voice. So Fran Drescher comes to mind. You know, this is a voice. Yeah, the nanny. So it comes from a real place, and that actually is the reason why that works. But when it comes to projection, it's something that you have to think about as well in the context of it. So, you know, for the most part, I speak right now with this kind of framing. I would speak as though you're across the table from me, and maybe with a bit of noise. So I do speak up a little bit, but I'm not going to shout, right? And there is also, you know, if you have the right kind of environment, and this is where all the investment comes in, right? If you invest in the right kind of environment, that means being able to close all your doors and have the aircon running at quiet mode, and maybe you have a few more curtains than most in your little boudoir de technology. Yeah, you could use that, and then that becomes a place where you can speak softly and impactful, and you can start whispering to the audience, and they go like, "Wow, that's cool."
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's not something one would consider normally doing in a professional context, whisper for effect. And I would hazard a guess that to employ such an effect, you would have to be displaying yourself as a visual as opposed to flashing an interminable number of PowerPoint slides. So tell us about that. What are your thoughts about sharing presentations on slides and hoping that that's going to get your message across, Joe?
Okay, so this is the thing about the presentations, and it's about how you have to think about what your presentation is doing versus you, because a presentation should be an ally, but the way most people use it is that it actually becomes an adversary. So your presentation, many times your PowerPoints are actually giving your audience permission to not pay attention to you. And what I mean by that is that very first moment when you come on and you flash that first slide, right? Now, you got to ask yourself, if I looked at this slide and I didn't hear you talking, could I figure out what you're going to say? And if the answer is yes, then one of you is redundant. You know, so if you look at your presentations right now, especially these presentation decks, people say, you know, I'm going to have a meeting and all, can you send your presentation deck? I, as a rule, try to have presentation decks that make no sense at all if you just look at the slides. You need the key of the narrative to unlock the slides, right?
Okay.
So if your slides really make all the sense in the world without you saying a word, then you're in trouble, because you can put up a slide that tells, for instance, say, let me tell you what the agenda for today is, and you show me the agenda slide, right? So at that moment when you put up that slide, your brain, and this is why we go back to the brain, thinking about the brain and what the brain is trying to do, you are not going to win, because that voice, the internal voice that you're competing with, is always louder, no matter how interesting what's in front of you is. So those of you who have ever tried to watch a show while reading a Facebook post, or those of you who try to even attend this maybe while you're just reading a message on WhatsApp, you realize that I've lost it, right? Because that voice came from inside your head, and it occupied the language centers, and you just don't have a chance against that. So the only way you can use visual presentations, I mean, for me, effectively, is this. You've got to have the audience working on trying to figure it out as you tell them, and you are the reason why they can figure out the next thing, right?
So I'm gonna making sure that the slides, you know, have that visual interest and a mystery about them, that they need to listen to you. Is there a ratio that you would recommend? Because not everybody is very good at listening. They're not aural people, AURAL. They can't listen very well. That's probably majority of folks. And they're more visual in nature. But I also get your point that if you've spelled everything out on your slide already, then what is the point of listening to you?
So I don't want to ever have anyone have the idea that what I'm recommending is about oral communication. It is oral, but when you do oral correctly, that phrase actually got said out loud. What you end up having is you end up having the visual cortex light up. So if you do and make no mistake, it's always about visual communication. So even if I'm using words, I have to be firing visual triggers in your mind. You have to be imagining things, because if you literally cannot imagine anything else except me as I speak, then I failed. I should have been triggering you to think about different things along the way. So I'm just going to do a little thing here. So you asked about the visual. So I'm going to do some visual stuff right now, right? I'm going to ask the audience to play along as well. You won't have to type in anything. This is just about you paying attention to your screen, okay? I'm going to show you these four suits from the playing card, and I want you to choose either one of those red suits. I want you to focus in on that one, right? Just make sure you've got one, and I'm sure you do. So I'm going to take that away right now, and then what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to have you look at the following cards, and what I've done is kind of made you choose one card. But so choose one of these cards. All right, and just remember which card it is that you have chosen.
Yep.
And if I've done my job right, your card has disappeared.
Ooh, I think you've done it right, at least in my context.
And I'm pretty sure I've done it right for quite a lot of people online as well. But that is really an example of using the medium. Understand steps at a time, right? You need to look at how to engage things in a sequence, right? Because this is a sequential medium. A webinar, a video, or a conversation actually is a sequential medium. And most people forget that it's this sequential thing. And with sequence, what you can do is you can create certain things. Now, this is also for me something which demonstrates the other thing, which is about creating moments of magic. So along the way today, I'm hoping you've had enough moments where you go like, wow, that was really cool. That was something that was interesting. I didn't expect that, or I didn't see that happen before. There's a bunch of people who would have had the mystery of the right card being chosen. There's some people who know how that trick is done, and that's great as well. It's in the chat, by the way. So that's the thing about this is that you go, okay, that was interesting. This is sort of different, right? And that's where it all comes back again to the brain. The human brain is what you're trying to engage. You're not just trying to have your words land. You're trying to get a reaction from the other side. So as much as it's a one-way communication, in your brain, what you should be doing is trying to elicit a conversation. If you can say something that leaves a gap in someone's mind, you've made them in their minds go, what? Or how, that's the kind of thing that I'm trying to encourage people to do. If you tick every box and you fill every blank as you make your communication, then what happens is there's nothing left for the other person's brain to do.
Right. Okay. And so, I mean, I think one of the things that we promised on the tin in promoting this session on the blurb was that we would educate folks as to things like when to take a break. And you have a theory on that, Joe.
Yes, I know. It's very popular. For me, you never take a break. That's it. You never take a break. People should feel that if they leave the show, if they leave the program, if they do whatever, they're going to miss something. And that's partly because of the way the medium works. You need to be engaging people, and as soon as you let someone go and do something else, they're going to try and figure. They don't even try to figure something else. They might look at their phone. They might be asked by one of the kids to do something. There's always going to be something that's going to get in the way of just remembering what you were doing before. So as responsible adults, you have that as well in your life, I'm sure. So I say don't ever make breaks. Don't ever leave holes in your program, because what's going to happen anyway is this, right? While we've been speaking, people have gone on breaks. right? Didn't say they
Absolutely.
should go and go for breaks or whatever it is, but they've gone on breaks. So I would rather you didn't give them a chance to leave, and if they leave, they miss something, and that's part of it. If people feel that they've missed something when they've gone away from your meeting, then you win.
Okay. So we have, thank you very much. We have about 5 minutes left on the session. And I know that we have pretty much answered questions as they've appeared on the chat, but I'd like to obviously, invite folks, if there are lingering questions that you haven't had the opportunity to ask thus far, now is your time. I'm finding it fascinating stuff myself. And I'm struggling, really struggling to pay attention to the camera. So that trick about pasting an attractive face, hopefully, in front of me next to the camera is something I'm definitely going to invest in.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those skills, and especially when you've pasted that picture there, you need to let your spouse and everyone around you know as well what's
Oh,
going
it'll be
on.
of my spouse. For sure it will be a picture of my spouse. No question.
Right, right,
No Korean heartthrob is in the running at all. No,
right.
not for me, at least, I assure you.
In which
And so
case,
we've got
you do want to explain to him why you're cutting up his photograph.
yes, of course. We've got a couple of questions, Joe, about how are you using green background and how do you change your background? Are those fairly simplistic things that you can research on Zoom or for the other platforms?
Okay, so one of the things that you need to do with green screens especially is you need to make sure your green screen is well lit, because the idea, what actually is happening is the computer is scanning from left to right and it wants to know where it can drop in the alternate image, right? And so if it's nice and clear that it's green, then it's easy for the computer to do that. So if you don't have a well-lit green screen, you're going to have all kinds of artifacts and problems. So I'm just going to take one of the lights down, for instance, right now. You can see there's a problem already. And if I take another light down, if you look in the picture, you can see some issues with the green screen. So if I take the main light out, you should be able to see other things that are happening that are weird, in the background. And I've just realized I can't turn it back on. Okay, yeah. So this is the thing about green screens. You need to make sure that they're well lit. And it's especially important when you're going to use them at night, because a lot of people do setups in the daytime and they go like, oh, it works just fine. And then what happens is at night, when your cameras are going to struggle, that's when you need to have the light. So the green screen is actually lit well as well. So if I could take it away and show it to you right now, I can't. Right now, I can't quite do that. But you'd see that the green screen in general, that there's no mistake that it's one kind of tone of green. Most people end up with a very badly lit kind of a green screen, so you can see that it's bright green and goes all the way to dark on one corner, and then you get all kinds of fuzzy effects and stuff like that.
So that's we've almost come to the top of the hour. About a couple of minutes left. Joe, I'm really appreciative. I've learned so much in this session.
Yeah.
Obviously, you in preparing yourself to navigate the new norm, did a fair bit of upskilling, and perhaps you can share the resource you leveraged on to find out all these snazzy things. I don't imagine that you came equipped with this knowledge right off the bat.
One of the things that I like to think about is how to solve problems, right? So if you see things that are being done right now, you see it in a movie, you see it in any number of things, someone solved the problem and someone made it possible to do. So I'm going to encourage you, first of all, to say that it's possible to figure out how those things are done. And I'm going to say that it's going to be sometimes difficult to do. Your friend is YouTube. If you're willing to go down the rabbit holes that they are, you can spend a few hours and learn. If you're trying to find a basic skill, very, very easy to find on YouTube. So that's one of the ways you can figure it out. What I've learned for myself is that I was looking around for cool stuff. I'm always just looking around for cool stuff. So when I do things, it's really for my own entertainment, right? And that actually is the key to it. If you think about it, that is the answer to how you engage people, entertainment. It ultimately is about that. And I think one of the things that we talked about is what we should do about employees and what I said in the blurb is you can't trust employees, right? You can't trust employees to be interested. You can't trust employees to be engaged, because even
or customers, to that point, not just employees, customers, clients. your
Yeah.
boss.
Yeah. So the currency that you are dealing with now actually is attention. You know, no matter what business you are in, the primary thing that you need, first of all, is attention. Once you get attention, then maybe you can start talking about the other stuff that is important. But if in social media or whatever it is, if people are scrolling right past you, you've lost it already. You know, your competitor is the one that's going to get everybody with something interesting. So if you're lucky, they come into a webinar and they start talking about stuff already, you start listening to you, that's fine. But before that, how are you going to do that? And then during that as well, hopefully you're engaging, right? And by the way, thank you very much to Vanita. I hope that was a typographical error. She says very usual insights. That's what I
Yes,
that's what
I'm
I try to
hoping
do.
that there was a missing UN. I found these very unusual myself. But certainly, thank you so much, Joe. I've learned so much myself. I think from the feedback that we're getting on the chat that others have too. And certainly we know that you do this for a living, and those who are willing to invest can hear more of your pearls of wisdom directly in some of the coaching sessions that you do yourself. Thank you again for joining us, and to the audience, thank you for being such an interactive and participative audience. We will be organizing a replay and sharing this with a wider audience soon. Thanks again, Joe. Take care. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome. And by the way, the secret to the software is